Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me and my two wonderful colleagues here for another in our series of the University Guys webinars. Our topic this evening, hopefully the right one you are joining us for, is what is holistic admissions for US universities? My name is David Hawkins. I am the director and founder at the University Guys, and we provide accredited and affiliated independent university guidance to students, typically at schools in the British Isles seeking to study internationally, or international students seeking to come and study at universities in the British Isles and Western Europe. It's my great pleasure to have a wonderful panel here tonight, and I will very quickly ask them to introduce themselves. So firstly, Lisa, if you could say hello.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As David mentioned, I'm the Associate Director of International Admissions at Syracuse University in Central New York State in the US. We're excited to be with you this evening.
Great, thank you, Lisa. And hello, Ronnie.
Hi, I'm Ronnie. I am an international admission counselor at Loyola Marymount University, located in Los Angeles, California, and I'm excited that you're all here.
Great, thank you very much. So thanks to Lisa and to Ronnie for joining. You're going to hear from both of them very shortly using their wonderful institutions and their holistic processes as an example to hopefully give some useful information that you can use to guide your own process, your child's process, or indeed the processes of the students that you work with. You will see within the GoToWebinar panel that there is the opportunity to ask questions and to chat. Please do try and post them in as we go. We will all try to deal with those. Anything that's really specific, I might save for follow-up email directly to you afterwards. And if you miss anything, this will be available as a recording about 3 hours afterwards. You should automatically get an email to enable you to log on and watch this back. If you would like a copy of the slides, please do contact me and I can send them over to you as a PDF file. My contact details will be back again at the last screen. So we're going to start off about a little overview from me looking at holistic admissions. And holistic admissions is a process whereby universities are looking at a vast amount of information about the student and are selecting for fit. For those experienced counselors in the call, you will use this term fit, I'm sure, with all your students. But for those new to US admissions, for students and parents, this idea of fit in US admissions might be something completely new to you. And it's a really important thing to understand when we're looking at university admissions for the United States, in that, yes, grades are fundamentally important. Universities need to know above anything that a student is academically qualified to go to their university and to succeed at that university. But the sheer variety of academic experiences available at US universities and the very different communities that different universities represent means that, as well as being smart enough to fit into the particular academic experience of that university, a student needs to also fit all the other things that go with it. And in the same way as someone might be choosing a very nice jacket and making sure it fits in all the right ways, universities are looking to see whether the students are presenting themselves in ways where they can imagine that student succeeding in that community. And that's a very different model of university admissions that you might be used to if you're advising students on going to more credential-based or grades-based systems, like, for example, the United Kingdom or a lot of European countries. Put that very briefly, a university may turn down a student with stellar grades who they do not think fits their community, and take a student with slightly lower grades who, because of other aspects in the application, the university admissions officer knows absolutely fits that university experience. In this, then, the message I like to get across in looking at US admissions compared to a lot of different systems is there's a significant difference between what I would say is good tactics and good strategy. Good tactics is doing all the little bits of the process well. You will have good test scores, good grades from school, you would have well-written essays, good supplemental essays, strong references from your school, a really well put together activities list, and everything is done well. But if that good tactics of all those wonderful bits of the application are sent to universities that the student might not be a good fit for, the strategy could be wrong. And if the whole element of that fits together well, then students are applying with good tactics and good strategy, then this process can be a really healthy one and a very successful one for students. However, if students are getting good tactics, but really not understanding how fit comes into this, then potentially they can be very disappointed by not quite understanding the process and knowing, well, why didn't I get into these universities? It could be the case that students have nothing wrong. The universities they're applying for are just hyper competitive. But I do think a lot of students who might not completely know the ins and outs of US admissions and maybe used to a process where actually good tactics is all you need. You get a good UCAS statement, a good reference, you have the right grades for the course you're applying for. Miss that bigger picture about how a student will fit a community. So it's important to understand then, as we are working with students, or you are going through this process yourself, how a university will review your application to search for fit. And a couple of questions that I think will kind of emphasize why fit is quite important in this. And I know there are people on the call now who aren't based in the British Isles, but a lot of people are, and I will focus a little bit on that comparison. Two questions I think it's important to bear in mind when we start to think about holistic admissions are the two on the screen now. What is the US equivalent of the Russell Group, the research-intensive UK universities? And some of you may have already said it in your heads right now, others may be thinking it. A lot of people will say the Ivy League. The Ivy League is US equivalent of the Russell Group, and I would say that is, I'm afraid, fundamentally wrong. The Ivy League, firstly, is a sports designation. So yes, those universities are very, very selective. They share a lot of common characteristics. They do tend to be a number of spots at the top of whatever US ranking you may think is valuable. But the Russell Group is a designation of research-intensive, traditionally academic university with a lot of programs and a comprehensive experience. And actually, the equivalent of that in the US will be the AAU, the Association of American Universities, who is a significantly bigger number than just 8 universities in the Ivy League. And when you look at the second question, which is the fact that in each year group, in each grade level in the US right now at high schools and younger than that, we're looking around 3.5 million students. I think actually in the current year, grade 11, the lowest 6th year, it's actually 3.7 million students. So it's not surprising then that the equivalent of a UK Russell Group has to be many more universities in the United States, because there are many more students. If you think that the Ivy League universities have about 22,000 spots a year, you can see how maybe you cannot fit a court into a pint pot. Now that's important also when we look at the fact that when applying to the United States, unlike in a lot of other systems, there is no firm application limit. Sometimes people check out, well, there's only 20 on the Common App. Well, yes, but you can send 20 in, delete those, and add another 20 in. I definitely would not advise it. But because students can make many more applications and numbers are so big, the competitiveness and the selectivity can get really very tough. So when universities are maybe receiving applications from extraordinarily high numbers of applicants who are themselves all academically very well qualified, there has to be another layer of selection on this beyond just the idea of who has the best grades for what we are asking for. So this scale really comes into it when we're looking at how the experience works. And some other statistics, again, hopefully just to hammer this point home. Every year, the Ivy League universities reject around 250,000 students. So that's the students who apply to one of the Ivy League universities, maybe multiple, and do not get in. In the UK, only about 350,000 UK students will enter a UK university every year. So you can see how the scale here is a little bit interesting. And so when you're starting to build your search and look about US universities, a good starting point for students maybe looking at the UK, but potentially if you're coming from other countries as well, is within the UK or within your home country or your country of education, how many universities would you think of going to? And if you're maybe looking, well, maybe there would be 8 in the UK that we think would be about right, then multiply that by 10. Or if you're in somewhere like Ireland, where there are only 9 universities, maybe multiply it by 20 or 25. To look at the number of universities that you should start exploring, because that's going to give you a very simple academic range of, if I'm looking at these 8 universities here, that will give me 80 in the US, probably that are going to be of a similar academic range to the ones I was considering here. Sometimes people will go, well, I'm looking at Oxford, so I'm going to look at the Ivy League as well. The analogy I would use to potentially talk about maybe the dangers of doing that is saying I want to go to Harvard is not like saying I want to go to Oxford, given that Oxford will take, like Cambridge, about 20% of its applicants and Harvard is less than 5%. Saying I want to go to Harvard is equivalent to saying I want to live in this room, in this building of this college at Oxford, in terms of selectivity. So it's really, hopefully that also gives an idea of the relative scale into this process. So when you are then advising students, or you are a student going through this process, what are you looking for? What is this process of fit that the admissions officers you're about to hear from are trying to see when they run a holistic admissions process? Well as those academics, what they're also trying to understand is the kind of student who will fit their particular experience. This is a slide I know some others on the call may have seen me use in previous presentations, but it's one I think is important and worth repeating. We have 3 universities on the screen now: Dartmouth in the middle, UCLA with the American football players and the flags, and NYU, New York University, with the purple. These are all universities that are looking for students with standout grades, students who have been very successful in whatever school system they've been in, your A star, A+ student. And yet they were looking for different types of student because they are different kinds of universities. So Dartmouth College is one of the Ivy League. It is in the town of Hanover, New Hampshire. It's a college town. Dartmouth really does dominate that town. You can walk through bits of Dartmouth on your way between different elements of the town. It's also in a rural area, which can sometimes experience quite a harsh winter. It can snow quite a lot. It can be potentially quite isolating. It's not as if students are going to be very easily popping to a big metropolitan city like Boston or potentially even Burlington. And so Dartmouth knows that as well as being really smart enough to do their degree and be academically qualified, a student has to display other characteristics. They have to be able to be a good member of a community, because that community at Dartmouth is going to be the one that you're going to be stuck with for your 4 years there. And Dartmouth then tests this admissions process by asking for students to procure an additional reference beyond the 3 from their school, and that reference should be from a peer, typically a friend, maybe someone they played sports with, maybe someone who has a mentoring role in something like the church or in a sports club or a musical organisation, but most commonly a friend. Dartmouth knows that you need to be able to demonstrate, as well as your academic abilities, that you can be a good member of a peer group. Now, in contrast, UCLA, like all the University of California universities, requires no information from a student's school. UCLA has over 100,000 applicants a year. It's a big, complicated, sprawling university with very interesting bureaucracy and requirements and regulations. And a student needs to be independent, really, to be able to survive the UCLA experience, to thrive in the UCLA experience even. And therefore, they're going to have to be quite independent to navigate that admissions process. Whereas NYU is a hyper-urban campus, slap bang in the middle of Manhattan, based in one of the world's mega cities. It also has a campus in Shanghai and a campus in Abu Dhabi, similarly hyper-urban campuses. So a student at NYU is going to be looked at in the context not just of their academics, but what about that student means they can thrive in this particular context. NYU normally every year have an application essay, which is why NYU. And in that, students will be well advised to talk about being in and of New York City, part of NYU's mission statement. So the point of explaining those is that the students for all 3 of these universities need to have similar standard grades to get in. But if a student applies to UCLA and Dartmouth and NYU going through a holistic admissions process, it's unlikely that you'll get into all 3, because the process is looking for things beyond just the academics. It's looking for how a student fits the particular kind of university that they are applying to. Part of that comes because of how the academics also work, and another level looking at holistic admissions. Very briefly, because I want to get on to hearing from my 2 colleagues. In the UK, a single honours degree or even a joint honours degree is very much you are applying into that course. You apply for history, you apply for engineering, and that is what is being delivered to you, like a set menu in a restaurant. That is what you are getting. A US degree, someone majoring in history may only take 1/3 of their classes in the field of history. Those other 2/3 will be up to the particular university to decide how they are distributed. Quite commonly, about 1/3 of those will be classes the university says a student must take in order to graduate. So commonly things from maths, fine arts, possibly physical education, humanities, literature, languages, and sciences, but variations within those. And the final 1/3 might be things like a double major and minor electives as well. Very much like a buffet style, where you can pick and mix what you're doing and with continuous assessment. And then beyond just that academic fit as well, it's also understanding that we have very different kinds of communities at US universities as well. So even beyond the sort of type of university it is, the bigger setting of a university, where is it located within the United States or within a state in the United States, can also impact that as well. So in the middle, we have the library from University of California, San Diego. And that city has particular culture, has particular types of things going on in there, and the university, the public university, serves a certain community. So a student looking to study in San Diego, potentially at UC San Diego, is also going to have to fit into the wider environment of what is that experience going to be like. Whereas in contrast, you can see the ice hockey game going on in the middle of the big house at the University of Michigan Stadium. That's going to be a very different kind of environment. Going to a big Division I sports school with a 110,000 seater stadium is going to be a different kind of community with a lot of focus on the sporting culture of an institution like that. Well, a small one here is Wellesley College. This is one of America's top-ranked women's colleges, located in the outskirts of Boston. And again, a very different kind of community that students will be able to access there as well. So when students are looking at this, when they are preparing themselves to go through a holistic admissions process, what can they do to test for fit? Looking at the university's core curriculum, so what is that academic? So Googling, Syracuse University core curriculum, Loyola Marymount University distribution requirements will help them understand those kind of things. I'm a massive fan, and with all the students who I work with as a private counsellor and others in my team do, we love our students to look at vlogs on YouTube, day in the life at LMU, day in the life at Syracuse, and students can start to experience these things. Admissions have wonderful Instagram accounts, which enable students very quickly to get a flavour of what's going on. Joining the mailing list of universities so they can be notified when to hop onto virtual sessions and tours are great. For those understanding what is this wider community like Google Maps and Google Street View, it's a really great tool to test for fit as well. Students might absolutely love that university, but might not be aware of just exactly what's going on beyond the confines of the campus like that. And a tool that students don't use, but is a really great one, is to just put in the name of the university into Quora, sort of question and answer format. And you can find all sorts of interesting things about former graduates of the university talking about these things as well. So that's enough from me. I will come back in the end to moderate your questions. Please do type the questions in if you need to, and I'll hand over to Lisa.
Thank you, David. Well, once again, thank you to everyone who's joining us today. I have a number of slides here, and I'll spend the next 10 to 15 minutes or so talking a little bit specifically about Syracuse, if you happen to have students or are a student who might be interested in Syracuse University, but we'll delve in a little bit more in detail about how we view fit as a member of the admissions committee here at Syracuse. So this is a nice, beautiful fall day. We do have sunshine in upstate New York as well. So that gives you a sense of our residential campus. And if you want to go to the next slide, David, I'll jump right in. Okay, just some quick facts about our university. And this is another kind of aerial view of our campus. So as David mentioned, there are a lot of different kinds of universities in the US in many different settings. So we're in one of those smaller college towns, not a huge metropolitan area, not a rural campus either, but in a small city in central New York State. So very different than, NYU or universities in Boston or New York City. But if a student wants that residential campus feel, with still feeling that strong sense of community, that's what we offer to our students. So we're medium-sized by US standards, so about 15,000 undergrad students, about 5,000 graduate students. You can see there in the parentheses, we've got a very strong international student population at both the undergrad and grad level. And I think that's important for students to keep in mind. Will I be joining a community of people from all around the world? Will I be sort of the only international student? And we're very proud and work very hard to maintain that strong international population here at Syracuse. So we are a private research university, so if students have an interest in research, we are a Carnegie Tier 1 institution, which is the highest rating in the US of university campuses. As I mentioned, that residential and urban campus, which is somewhat unusual. We do offer liberal arts and pre-professional programs, and students do have the flexibility if they know where they want to begin. They can start out in a specific major, or if they're undecided, there are options for that too. And it's not uncommon for students to maybe change their minds once or twice, maybe a few times, and we get that. Our curriculum is meant to be flexible to allow for that exploration. Similarly to our student population, our alumni network is also global, and we've got more than 300 clubs and organizations for students to get engaged with and feel like they're part of a strong community while they're with us. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a bit more about the academic experience, as I mentioned earlier. So we have 200 academic majors, we call them in the US, or courses, and 100 minors, including opportunities to have multiple majors, multiple minors. And students don't have to set foot on campus on the first day knowing exactly what that will look like. Everyone has a faculty advisor, a peer advisor, often a third academic advisor, and they help students in navigating all those different choices that they have. So because we're broken down into so many academic programs, it gives students sort of a smaller college feel within sort of the context of a major university with a fairly manageable average class size. We do have some of those larger intro courses for us. Those are typically in the sciences, but on average, a class size of 26 is something we work hard to maintain for our students. Next slide, please. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, highly rated research institution. And I know for those of you who are students who might be watching, sometimes research can sound a bit intimidating. Well, that sounds great. What does that mean? One of our faculty members last year, I think, really described it well when she was meeting with prospective students. And she told them, you know, think about research as a problem that you'd like to solve. And I think that makes it seem much more accessible. You know, we all have problems that we might like to be a part of solving. And I think that sort of puts things into perspective for you. So something we encourage from day one, really, for our students. Career and professional advising, one sort of leads right into the other, because we know that all of the great things that you're doing on campus are going to lead you to a successful career and beyond. Study abroad and study away, so not just in other countries, but also in Los Angeles, in New York, in Washington, D.C., and other places in the U.S. Those are very popular experiences for our students. And of course, internships and hands-on experiences really across the board. I think basically all American universities will encourage you to have these experiential learning opportunities from a very early point while you're with us. Next slide. Okay, so the idea of all of these resources that we give you is to give you a very well-supported student experience. So those clubs and organizations that I mentioned, we have Orange After Dark is an organization on campus that provides evening entertainment, comedians, performances, musicians, midnight yoga in the Carrier Dome. You can see the corner of the Carrier Dome in that photo there. That's our athletics facility where our basketball and football teams play American football, and that's right off of our main campus. So we keep our students busy for sure. It's the balance of academic work and being part of a community as well. Many of our students are interested in community service, so you can get connected with those opportunities in Central New York and beyond. Though we're not in a major metropolitan city, I think we do a great job bringing global industry leaders right to campus. So, you know, Oprah's been on campus a few times since I worked at Syracuse. I did get to see Trevor Noah a few years ago when he was here. And I did miss Margaret Atwood, so you might be familiar with her work. She's a Canadian author of The Handmaid's Tale and a number of different novels. So just a sprinkling of the many, many different visitors we welcome to campus each year. Athletics, of course, is a big interest. So we are a Division I university, though obviously a majority of our students might play a club or intramural sport rather than varsity, but we have a number of great options there. And again, it is a residential campus, so our students are required to live in university housing for the first 2 years. And after that, it's an option that you have. So it's not a place that kind of empties out on the weekends. It's really very active throughout the academic year. Next slide. Okay, so this is actually the rock wall in our new athletics facility, the Barnes Center, which is a nice integrated health and wellness facility that opened up just about a year ago. And I felt like that was an apt metaphor for navigating the application process. It's a bit of a challenge, but you have some people to help you through it. So we'll move on to the next slide and talk about the nuts and bolts a little bit more. Okay, so back to this idea of a holistic admissions review. And I really appreciated David's comments about not just being about test scores and grades. You know, at Syracuse and most major American universities, if we admitted everyone with a certain grade point average, you know, we get 30 to 36,000 students applying every year. If we accepted everyone with these grades or higher, we would have an entering class possibly of 10 or 12 or 15,000 students. And that's not the kind of institution that we are. We try to manage our class and ultimately bring in about 3,600 students every year. So we do look for things beyond academics kind of plus other things. Some universities do a general admission. We do admit students into a particular program of study. So admission rates are going to vary and the idea of fit is going to vary. For example, if you're looking at an engineering program, we're going to look very closely at your math and science and things that are related to strengths that are needed to be successful in that program. If you're looking to go into journalism, we're going to look at your writing skills and public speaking and other qualities. And a lot of that is intuitive. It makes sense. But you have to think about it in those terms when you have that many students applying. We do use the common application, as many major universities in the US will do. And so we at Syracuse do require that you list one, we call them a school or college, you might call them a faculty, as your first choice, with the option of listing a second and different academic choice. So if we aren't able to offer you admission to the first choice, you can be considered for that second one. And that way it gives us a few different ways to review your application. I think this next point is especially important this year. We've long been optional with the SAT and ACT for students who are studying outside the US for a host of reasons, but that's entirely optional. That's not a trick that it's secretly preferred. It truly is optional, and we encourage you, if you plan to take it, you can talk to us before you send in the scores. We're happy to help you kind of strategize and see if that will be helpful to you in the process. It might be, it might not. So feel free to talk to us about that before you sort of click the button and have that sent. I think admissions interviews, especially this year, have a special place. We're happy to offer those, and we've long done that for students, especially outside the US. Typically, we use Skype. I suspect this year we'll be doing Zoom interviews too, but we're happy to offer admissions interviews. Those are typically with a member of the international admissions team, and it might be 20 to 30 minutes. They're fairly informal, but it lets us get to know you a little better. We can talk about why you've chosen to apply to the university, why the specific major, and you can get your questions answered as well. It's kind of a give and take. It's not just us asking a lot of questions. As far as curriculum requirements, as you can imagine with this holistic review, a lot of things aren't necessarily hard and fast, but we do need, if you're doing the UK curriculum or your students are, completion of the 6th form, 2 years of study past the GCSE, and or the equivalent. So it's the equivalent of completing grade 12 here in the United States, which is sort of the end of high school. And at the bottom of that slide, of course, the international admissions page, which you can also reference at any time if you would like more clarification on what we require. Next slide, please, David. Okay. So as David mentioned, yeah, we are all looking for strong students, absolutely. But we are communities. We're sort of, these small cities in some cases, and we want to really have a campus that's got a lot of different people, many different perspectives represented. We tend to see that our students are interested in leadership, they're interested in service, they're interested in taking advantage of a campus that gives them a lot of different academic opportunities, as well as a strong campus life. Those are all qualities that help students to be successful. So it's not about us being gatekeepers and saying, oh, limiting opportunities. We do our best as admissions officers to bring students in who can thrive and be successful and contribute to that greater sense of community that we offer. We do look for familiarity with the university. It's very easy with the common application to apply to a lot of different universities, but those supplemental essays that you write, or maybe that admissions interview, that is a way for you to show us your research, how you see yourself kind of fitting in, why the university is a good fit for you. It also shows us the strength of your writing, and I repeated myself here, sorry about that. But yes, yeah, that familiarity, your research, particular courses that you're really interested in, clubs you'd like to join. It doesn't have to be an extensive thing, but just show us that you've gone above and beyond a little bit in your research and why you think it's a good fit for you. And for some of our programs like architecture, musical theater, performing arts, visual arts, studio arts, things like that, it's a combination, of course, of academics and all those other things, but also an audition or portfolio component. And that for us is evaluated by the faculty of that major, not by the admissions officers. We're looking at the academics and all those other things. They're really looking at the talent portion. Next slide, please. Okay. So how this idea of fit, how it works in the admissions process is really, we encourage you to become kind of the driver of the process as a student, or if you're a counselor, to encourage your students to do the same. Now, in a normal year, we would encourage campus visits if you can. I know that's harder when you're across an ocean and in another country, but some families are able to wrap around a family vacation, visit some campuses, things like that. Meeting with an admissions officer, we all, again, normally are traveling around the world, coming to university fairs, maybe coming to your school, offering admissions interviews in person. That may not be possible this year. So there are a lot of different things that you can do, like sessions like this one, online university fairs, virtual campus tours. I know we're all doing sort of virtual information sessions. A lot of different universities are. So a lot of those same things are available just in a virtual setting. So take advantage of that. And the idea of fit for us, it varies by major. So getting to know your admissions officer, getting to know your contact at that university will be helpful to you and to your students. We can sort of help you in approaching the way that you write your essay, the things that you focus on and include that really make sense for the particular majors you're looking at. And again, we do offer those virtual admissions interviews as part of the applicant process as well. So next slide. Okay, Now, all of these things, you might hear this term as used by admissions officers as demonstrated interest. Some universities factor, the number of times you opened an email, the number of times you engaged in an information session online, things like that, and in factoring in who they'll admit to the university, with the idea being the more engagement a student has with the admissions office, the more likely they will be to enroll. I can tell you on our side, we look at that for international admissions, but we sort of understand that not everyone's going to visit campus. There are some limitations, certainly this year, perhaps more so than ever. So we'd love for you to be informed and to take advantage of those resources that you have so that you can feel good about the decisions that you're making, that it's not necessarily, well, if this student had opened one more email, we would accept them. That's not really the way it works for us. And one note about extracurricular activities, I get this question a lot of concerned students that in other countries, you may not have time, you may not have access to volunteering in clubs at your school or things like that. We get that. We encourage you, if you can, take advantage of things like that. That's great. Explore things that are of interest to you. If you can shadow someone in a profession you're interested in, that's great for you. But we understand that culturally, the opportunities are not the same necessarily around the world. And any good university with a strong international student population, your admissions contact will get that. They won't have the same expectation of students outside the US as we might for students here domestically. Next slide, please. Okay, so this quote I love to use all the time, composing an interesting class. So we had a director of admissions here at SU who spent her entire career, so 45 years, she worked in our office and just had so much wisdom that she shared with all of us while she was with us. And I love to share that in these conversations because it is about composing an interesting class of people, not just about grades and marks and scores, but really, academic achievement, creativity, leadership, citizenship, where students call home, having a gender balance, geographic balance, including international students, so that when you're in a classroom, it's an interesting mix of people. We don't want you to come in and have a classroom or a cohort filled with people who are exactly the same, who have the exact same experiences. We work hard to really make sure that that's many diverse viewpoints represented in our classrooms. Some of our majors enroll 25 students a year. So programs like musical theater, for example, you need to have a diverse cast, literally. If you're going to put on, good performances, people need to have different skills that they're bringing to that performance, and not just in performing arts, but really across the board. So there are also particular enrollment priorities and goals that each institution will set. That's not something that you're likely to see on, College Confidential or, US News and World Report or all these different things. So there are other factors kind of going on behind the scenes that might ultimately affect admissions decisions that are being made. Maybe they're looking to grow a program, maybe they're looking to make it a bit smaller. Some of those things are just going on kind of behind the scenes. And then, of course, the number of people who apply and the strength of those applications will vary somewhat every year. So a student might have gotten in a few years ago, a younger sibling might get waitlisted. They might not get into that same program a few years later, but that's because the number of applications has increased since then. So it can be very tricky because you just don't know. There's a big leap of faith involved in applying to American universities. You just aren't quite sure what that result will be. But again, your best bet is really to get to know your admissions officers and to inform yourselves as much as you can that it is a complicated process for sure. Next slide, please, David. Okay, and using your resources, David said the same thing earlier. We're all on the same page here. That's what we're here for. We like to work with students. We're here to really help you navigate what can seem like an overwhelming process. And that's for counselors at the secondary school level, for parents, for family members, for students to, rely on your admissions officers. This is why we do what we do. University counselors at the school. David has a host of programs going on throughout the summer, so these are always valuable to students and counselors and family members, and all of the online options. Like I said earlier, we don't know yet if we'll be, we're called road warriors. We may not so much be road warriors this year, but we'll be Zoom warriors, I think, instead. But we'll have lots of different virtual ways to connect with current students too. I think that's really important, especially if you're not able to visit in person, but connect with our current students in lots of different ways to get a sense of their experiences. And if you're unsure, just ask David, ask one of us. Even if it's a general question, I think those of us who work in international admissions get that it's not just about our speech for our universities. It really is about educating students and navigating the process. So just ask, and if we don't know the answer, we'll get you to someone who does, whether that's at our institution or if it's beyond. But use your resources and then never hesitate to ask those questions that you have. And I believe that's it for me. Yeah.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much, Lisa. So, hugely comprehensive, really helpful to be able to see the context of Syracuse and therefore how the particular environment and academic community that SU is feeds over into your holistic process from one part of the United States to another, and quite often probably one of the most beautiful views you would ever see on a college campus. So Ronnie, over to you to discuss LMU.
All right, well, thank you, David, and thank you, Lisa, for sharing. I'm excited to share a little bit more about LMU and the holistic admission process. David, if you don't mind sliding over, next slide. So this is our agenda today. We'll be talking a little bit about the holistic review process and what that means, fit, and also finding your fit at an institution. And then using LMU as an example and getting to know LMU a little bit more. Next slide, please. So we'll start with that holistic review process. And if you don't mind going over one more, perfect. So the holistic review process, it's a way for us to get to know you as a student outside of your GPA, outside of your test scores. It's a way for us to get to know your unique journey and what's brought you here and why you're applying to our institution. It helps us evaluate factors such as that academic readiness, the contribution to the incoming class, as well as the potential for success at our institution and in your future career. Next slide, please. So some things that are considered, here's a list of things. Some things that I'll point out, of course, is the strength of academics and test scores. Especially right now, LMU, like Syracuse, has been test optional, but it is going to be really important for you to ask the institutions that you're applying to if COVID-19 is affecting their test optional or test required schools. So that's something I'll point out for you as well. Your personal statement and essay. This is something that's really important. Personal statement kind of gives us an opportunity to see your personality and understand where you've been as a student, as well as that supplemental essay. It's really designed for the institution. So make sure you're answering the question. I know it sounds silly, but each question is designed specifically for different institutions. So making sure that you're answering them specifically is really important. As well as editing your papers. So make sure you're editing. We're looking at that university level writing as well as that grammar. So that's really, really important too. And then something I will point out again, just to reiterate, Lisa, that demonstrated interest is really important, especially within your application. There's going to be different opportunities for you to explain why you're interested in the institution that you're applying to. And I really do encourage you to take those opportunities. Let us know that you've been interested in LMU for your whole high school career, or that you have an older sibling, or you've heard from a peer. We're really interested in why you've stumbled upon our institution and are excited of why you're applying to. Next slide, please. And why is this important? So, like I mentioned, holistic admissions is a strategy for admission counselors to get to know you. In universities that do use this holistic admission process really believe that external influences are just as important as your academics. And we want to know what's brought you to this point and get to know you inside and outside of that classroom. Next slide, please. But just as important of us understanding how you would fit with our institution, it's also really important for you to understand how you would fit within an institution as well. So I do have some suggestions for you. If you don't mind going to the next slide, David. Go ahead and click one more time. So you're going to begin your search. If you don't mind clicking one more time. Sorry about that. So first, you're going to start with beginning your search. David mentioned there's so many different opportunities in the US. So this is really an opportunity for you to decide what type of institution you're looking for. The size of an institution, they range from small to large, and the location of the institution, I mentioned we're in Los Angeles, Lisa's in New York, so you have a wide range of locations that you could choose from, as well as the mission of the institution is really important to look at. Academics, so academic programs. Academics is why you're here. It's the #1 reason that you're going to be at the institution. So making sure that the institution has the academic program that you're interested in. If it offers a core curriculum, or David kind of mentioned general education classes that institutions require students to take, what type of core curriculum are you going to be studying for the next 4 years? Are there different opportunities to engage in research outside of the classroom? Student life. So student life is also going to be a really big part of your university career. It's a really exciting piece of your university career. So making sure that those universities have something that you're interested in, different clubs and organizations. If you're interested in sports, LMU, like Syracuse, is a Division I sports team or sports organization. So making sure that the institution has something that fits your interests is really important. Student supports and opportunities. So different student support services. Are you interested in studying abroad while you're at an institution? Because it is possible to study abroad while you are choosing to also study abroad for your 4 years. And different career placements and outcomes. So where are the graduates going after they graduate, right? And what type of steps are the institutions taking to make sure that the students are successful after they graduate and within their time at the university? And financial aid, of course, is a very important part. What type of merit-based scholarships are institutions offering? Because each institution will be different in the range that they offer, as well as different opportunities for on-campus employment. And finally, when you get to that narrow end of your search, knowing that admission timelines and the application requirements, each institution will be different in their timeline and slightly in their requirements. So making sure that you take note of that is really important. And then next step, please. And we'll be using LMU as an example to go through these different scenarios to help you find your fit. So first, LMU is located in Los Angeles, California. I mentioned location is really important. There's a number of universities in Los Angeles. So LMU is located in that green area. We're about a kilometer away from the nearest beach, a 15-20 minute drive from Santa Monica and Venice Beach. And if you're interested in that downtown area, we're about 45-minute drive away from there as well. Next step, please. And then we are a Jesuit-based institution, so we are of Catholic faith. It is important to note that we do not require our students to be of Catholic faith, and we welcome students from all different backgrounds and all different faiths, and we really celebrate the diversity that brings to this institution. Where you see our Jesuit tradition is really in our mission, which is we will see on our next slide. So you see the Jesuit values and the encouragement of learning, that education of the whole person. So we really focus on engaging our students inside the classroom and outside of the classroom. We'll really encourage you to take on different leadership positions in organizations, and we have staff in your community to help and support you along the way. The service of faith and promotion of justice. Service is really integral to our university. We really put that on the forefront of our learning. We think it's really important to give back to our community, both locally and globally, and we'll teach students how to advocate for themselves and for others. Next slide, please. And then the academic experience. So getting into the academic experience, we are a medium-sized institution with just shy of 6,700 undergraduates and the average class size of 20. So that's something else that's really important to ask institutions what their average class size is. Within LMU, you have the opportunity to learn from your professor in that small classroom environment. So you get to know your professor one-on-one, and that opens up different opportunities for research and also mentorship programs. Next slide, please. Rankings. So rankings may also be important as well. So LMU is ranked number 64 in the United States, with our top programs being marketing, school film and television, and entrepreneurship. But we do have over 60 majors and minors that you could see on this next slide that we offer. So we offer 60 majors and minors within our School of Liberal Arts, Business Administration, Communication and Fine Arts, as well as School of Film and Television, and finally the Seaver College of Science and Engineering. Next slide, please. And so getting into that student experience, David, if you don't mind just clicking a few times, it's going to be a total of 8 times, I believe, 4 more. Thank you, that's great. So student experience, I mentioned in that little funnel chart that student experience is really important to you and it's going to be integral to your university career. LMU offers 200 plus clubs and organizations ranging from things like Model UN to Surf and Ski Club. I always like to mention Surf and Ski Club because our international students are heavily involved in this club. I mentioned we're a kilometer away from the beach and about an hour-and-a-half drive away from our nearest mountains. So it's really great opportunity for our students to get involved in. I mentioned service organizations. Service is really important for us at LMU. So there's a bunch of different little things you could get involved in as well. And then going into a little bit about student support services. If you click on the next slide, David. Career and professional development is going to be one of the big support services that you may be looking for. So at LMU, we really focus on our career and professional development for our students throughout their entire process at LMU. So we offer things like resume workshops, interview workshops, but also take the opportunity to take students outside of LMU and really integrate them within the communities that they're interested in learning from. So we do career treks and site visits where students travel off campus to meet with alumni, parents, and other LMU affiliates in their workplaces. So for example, students went to San Francisco and Silicon Valley to be specific, since they were interested in the tech industry and got to meet with different employees and learn about their experiences. Next slide, please. And then the outcomes, like I mentioned, it's really important for LMU to focus on the career and professional development, and that's really shown in our 99% of LMU undergraduate students that got either employment or graduate school within 6 months of graduating. Next slide, please. One more time. And these are just some of the examples that students go off to work for, different companies that students go off to work for after graduation. Next slide, please. Thank you. And student support services, I do really want to reiterate how important these are. These are just some of the options that are offered at LMU. I will point out the Office for International Students and Scholars. There's a specific department for international students on our campus that will help with, of course, visas or employment, but also specific programming for international students. If you see in the bottom right-hand corner, there's an example of this. We had a Global Engagement Day where different clubs and organizations put on performances or put on booths. This is an example of some of our students doing a folklorico dance. It was really beautiful and a fun experience. Before we switch sides, I also have to point out this dog in here. His name is Buster. He's a therapy dog at LMU. He's housed in our students and psychological services. You could sign up to walk Buster, and a lot of our students take this opportunity to walk him around campus. Next slide, please. And then residence halls. Residence halls is going to be a really big part of your university career as well. LMU has a new residence hall coming in fall 2020 that's pod style, so it's also a single room, and then you have a community living space. But of course, we have traditional residence halls as well, where you'd be sharing with a roommate. So residence halls is also a fun way to get to know what the institution offers. Next slide, please. And then finally, our undergraduate application requirements. So going back to that holistic review process, it is really important for our students to submit one of the 3 application options. Of course, the common application is the most common. I really would like to reiterate that importance of the LMU supplemental form and answering those questions that are really dedicated to the different institutions. We do require 1 academic letter of recommendation. It's at least 1. You could submit more if you'd like, but 1 is just fine. SAT and ACT scores are not required. They are completely optional. They are recommended for merit-based scholarship consideration, and you could always reach out to one of us and we could talk through that a little bit more with you as well. And then of course the application timeline and requirements. We are an early decision and early action school, so you are able to submit your application a little bit earlier in November or on that regular priority deadline on January 15th. Next slide, please, David. So thank you for taking the time to learn a little bit more about LMU and the holistic admission process. If you'd like to get to know more about LMU or have any questions that I went over today, international.lmu.edu is our website, as well as my email address is right there. So thank you again, David, for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you so much to you for again, a very comprehensive overview and of how the nuances, again, of the particular environment that LMU offers are potentially going to ensure that students tailor their application to that. I'm just going to wrap things up for a few minutes. We haven't had any questions come in or anyone in the chat. I hope that means that it is working and we've either done a good job or people will follow up directly via email, and not that the system is completely bust, but if it is, I apologise for that in advance. It's really great to hear from Lisa and Ronnie. You know, two wonderful institutions my students will regularly apply to, and institutions I've had the privilege to bring to schools, including some of the schools of those joining us tonight here in the British Isles. But really important that, as well as discussing the process by which they review applications, to also understand the particular type of environment a student is going into. It's great actually to hear examples, to hear Ronnie talking about how service underpins so much of the culture of LMU. And so a student needs to know that they are going to be pushed to be in a service environment at LMU. And indeed, LMU has a wonderful set of supplemental essay questions which do serve to design a process that enables them to work out, is this student ready for this? And you know, for students on the call or for advisors, if you're speaking with a student where maybe that is not something that really motivates them, then they may not then come through that holistic process very well. Equally with Syracuse, the example of applying into different parts of the university, it's a great question. And when I'm dealing with a student who might have come to me already with a firm sense of where they're applying to, if they give me something like Syracuse and say, well, which bit of Syracuse you're applying to, it's very rare the student will be able to tell me exactly what they're doing so. I know for advisors on the call who may be very new to US admissions, this can be hugely intimidating. I'm afraid that those of you who are used to a UCAS system may be lulled, unfortunately, to a false sense of how university admissions works. UCAS, for someone like me who regularly advises students on a dozen different countries' applications a year, UCAS is one of the world's most straightforward application procedures. So unfortunately, everywhere is complicated, but the US takes complication to a new extreme. To help with some of these things, we at the University Guys like to put all sorts of information out there as freely as we possibly can do. So the universityguys.com, if you click on the knowledge tab, as you will see here, all sorts of information. This webinar will be added to our bank of webinars there as well. We're now up to podcast 51, 52 and 53 on the changes in standardized testing will be coming live together, one on the US and one on the international perspective on testing this Saturday. Lots of guides, not just about US admissions, but about options all around the world, and some FAQs about just what we do and how we go from there. We have more webinars coming up soon, including actually more this week. If you are interested in finding out about things like University of Applied Sciences in Europe, we've got options for those who may be outside the UK on how to look beyond the major cities for universities in the UK. And indeed, a really interesting one on what I'm calling cost-effective solutions for North America, looking at maybe hidden pathways that students don't always know about in order to drastically reduce the cost of studying in either Canada or the United States. All those are available for you to see and register at universityguys.com/live. The podcast really does help in giving little 25-minute, half-an-hour snippets into these kind of topics. One of my favourite ones recently with my good friend Marie V. Walker at the Florida Institute of Technology, exploring again another nuance of looking at fit in US admissions, which is, yes, you might want to study engineering, but how do you want to study engineering in the United States? And for those who might be new to that, understanding there are potentially 5 different pathways where you can receive a degree that is at an engineering school, that is an Institute of Technology, is a major in engineering, or some combined program for students who are looking into that kind of process. So fit and holistic review does come into almost every aspect of US university admissions. If you are a student or a parent, or you are on the rise and have students or parents who are looking into this kind of stuff, it's my great pleasure alongside my colleagues to offer free 30-minute consultations. The link is there, universityguys.com. Book a one-on-one session with the hyphens in between, take you to a calendar link on there where you can book my time for a free half-an-hour consultation from there. It only leaves me then to say a massive thank you to both Lisa and Ronnie for giving up their time. Not only have they persevered and spent time in small minibuses bombing around the English countryside in schools in the last year, but also then decided to give up even more of their free time to join me on a webinar to speak to you, our wonderful audience tonight. So thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you for having us. I hope this was helpful to everyone.
Yep, I'm happy to be here. Thank you, David.
Great, fantastic. So for everyone who has joined us, I see some people are skipping off. This will come into your inbox as recording in the next 3 hours. You are more than welcome to share it with your students, with your parents. If you are a student or a parent, to share it with others. It will also be embedded live at our Facebook page, facebook.com/theuniversityguys. And we hopefully will have been able to offer you some useful information. And please do join us soon for future webinars. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.